Good morning. As the elder, I'm delighted to share my special experience in Angola. As many of you know, I love to travel our exciting, wonderful world. I've been very excited and fascinated by Mike's swimming of the English Channel and his sharing the money with Waka Kongu so they could build a school. I was impressed when the Angolans visited us in 2017. So when an email popped up in my box announcing a partnership trip, building trip to Angola, of course I opened it, not realizing the person who sent it was checking who had done it. So one Sunday, Mike said, are you interested? And he assured me seniors were included. So thus commenced a wonderful, beautiful, meaningful experience. Angola is many things. It's a beautiful country with mountains, green, fertile valleys, miles of dusty, bumpy roads, colorful markets bustling with locals selling their produce, singing congregations, smiling, curious children. But to me, the most important memory is the friendly, outgoing, generous people of strong faith. We witnessed this every day, wherever we went, in the churches, the villages, the schools. The welcome we received upon arrival in Waka Kongu, where the Mike Solberg School stands, was warm and overwhelming. The children surrounded us as they showed us their classrooms. The congregation sang their hearts out as we enjoyed their service, always being seated in the front row. How special it was to meet our hosts for our stay in Wambo. What a privilege to be a part of their family for our visit. They welcomed us with open arms and treated us like royalty. Pastor Grant and I were hosted by Matika and her 3 children. When she saw me, she graciously asked, "Can you climb to the 2nd floor?" And I assured her I could. Then she showed Pastor Grant his bedroom suite. I was then shown to my snug little tiny room. Grant, the gentleman that he always is, insisted we switch. But no, pastors are respected as they should be. After a busy day, Grant and I would retire to Matika's veranda that overlooked the nearby homes at sunset and chat for hours. What an extra bonus to get to know such a delightful, thoughtful young man. Each day was filled with learning experiences, from visits to the market bargaining for 20,000 kilos of maize or corn to be sent south to help the people who were experiencing a drought, or planting 200 eucalyptus trees with the local youth who were happily digging holes for hours under the hot sun, or attending the funeral of a young mother in her small rural village, exploring Dandi mission with a small hospital, or lunching at the home of the director of the seminar, Adelaide. I was anxious to meet Adelaide because she had stayed with a friend of mine, and Janice wanted me to meet her. At the end of a busy day, we'd gather at the language school and have meaningful as we shared our experiences and expectations. Enjoying the 4-hour service with our partners at Peregrini Church in Wambo was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. To witness their vibrant faith in action was thrilling. To be present as Mike baptized Moma's children was unforgettable. To join them in singing with their 5 choirs was moving. And as an elder, I was often respectfully called Mama or Mother by the locals. In fact, at the last church we visited, which was led by a young female pastor, as we were leaving to catch our flight back to Luanda, They wished to hear from Mama, which was me. From my heart, I could very sincerely share my deep feelings about this, my experience with the congregation, that I was going home to share my memories with my family, my friends, and my congregation. Many wonderful memories of the beautiful Angolans I had met who had shared their lives, their homes, beliefs, and deep faith. Traveling is very talented people like our faithful guide, Moma, gentle Mendez, who chauffeured us many miles, Jalumbi, whose lessons were unbelievable and perfect, and Angola is a country of a turbulent country of civil war and corruption and great poverty, but it is called a country, so it's called a country of problem. But with these wonderful leaders that we met, we just knew that this is a country of possibilities. I find travel is very enlightening, and if you have the opportunity to travel, it can really help you understand humanity. This trip was certainly a transforming experience as advertised.
Good morning. I love to travel too. I haven't been on as many trips as June has, but when the opportunity came around for a trip to go to Angola, it made me very, very curious. I'm also on the mission board, mission ministry, and co-chairing it this year with Tracy Biancalana. And the mission ministry has provided funds for the Language Institute in Angola and various other matters, including involvement with the doctor at the Dondi Hospital and so forth. So that's all I needed to say, okay, I gotta go on this Angola trip. And boy, am I glad I did. Today I'm going to just speak with you briefly about my Angola family. My experience with this family was one of the highlights of my trip, and I really wanted to share it with you. While we were in Angola, all of us except Andy Hatoling, who you'll hear from later, who was out at the Dondi Hospital, stayed with local families, members of the Peregrinos Church, which is our partner church. And we all had different hosts and thus had varying experiences, as you've heard already. But each of us got to know our hosts in a very personal way. My hosts and hostess were called the Vapurs, and they were a married couple with 4 children, ages 18, 16, 10, and 8. And also in the household was a 20-year-old daughter, who was the daughter of my host by a previous relationship, as well as a 26-year-old cousin of my hostess. So it was a fairly big household. The family, by Angola standards, was doing very well. It was middle class, which meant that this family was quite a minority in the country. Alcides, the dad, worked for the Angolan army. He was a biochemist, and the army was paying for him to get a PhD in biochemistry in Portugal. So I met him very briefly the first afternoon we were in Huambu, but then he had to go off back to Portugal, back to his PhD program. Adelmina, or Delmi for short, was the mom, and she was a high school chemistry teacher. They lived in what would be described as a modest 4-bedroom house with 1.5 baths. There was a small garden, and the home was completely surrounded by a high iron fence. The entry gate was kept closed and locked unless someone was coming in and out. And they had a dog, but the dog didn't come in the house. Its main function was to bark if someone was approaching the house. But despite of all this security, I never felt unsafe. I was welcomed with open arms by everyone in the family, and Delmi, the mom, set the tone. She met my every need, provided delicious meals, and most importantly, was warm and inviting. Language, of course, was a bit of a challenge, as I did not speak Portuguese, but we managed much better than expected. Delmi had taken English classes at the Language Institute that we support, and we both had Google Translate on our phones. So we were able to make ourselves understood to each other. But I had an added bonus lifeline in my house, and that was Ario, who was the 16-year-old son of Delmy. He was amazing. He takes English in school, but he also takes private English classes. Then he goes on YouTube and learns more, and then he's got Duolingo app. He was really motivated. And he was working on his English slangs and idioms. So whenever I used one that he didn't know, he would stop me, ask me about it, and then write it down in his phone. And then, most importantly, he'd use it later in the day. He was really quite an amazing guy, and he really was a help to me during my time there. I became a playmate for Ario's two little sisters, Kelsia, who was 10, and Agelsia, who was 8. We would be gone most of the day doing our delegation duties, and we would come back usually in the early evening. But whenever I came home, the little girls would come out, running out, and they would give me a big hug, and we would sit down in front of the TV and start to talk. Of course, I didn't speak Portuguese, and they didn't speak English, but that didn't matter. Kelsia would get her mom's phone, get that Google Translate, and off we'd go. Often Google Translate is not perfect, and of course we had some very fun times giggling and laughing over really bad translations. Dinners with the family, which always started with grace, were festive affairs and got bigger and louder as the week progressed, as more and more extended family members joined us. And despite the language barrier there were so many smiles, so much laughter, and lively conversation. I feel so honored and blessed to have been part of this supportive and welcoming family from our partner church, Peregrinos. Getting to know them all as individuals and being able to build relationships with them was a true highlight of the trip. Thank you.
My name is Andy Hoteling. I was on this trip. I'm a pediatric otolaryngologist at Loyola, so that's ear, nose, and throat medicine and surgery for children. I've been there since 1991. I participated in 2 surgical missions to Vietnam, 6 to Santiago in the Dominican Republic. I've also been to Soweto, South Africa, Malawi, and Guatemala on church service missions. In my opinion, the medical care I saw in Angola is the worst I've observed in any third world country I visited. So, as you know, 10 of us traveled. My charge was to assess a rural health mission in Dundee. Dundee is about an hour from the town that we stayed at called Wambo. It is very rural. I was to assess the hospital, and I was to provide some ENT care to patients. Angola experienced a long civil war from 1975 to 2002. It destroyed much of the infrastructure in the country, and you can see that today. A lot of the fighting took place near Dundee, where I was. Most of the population in Dundee is very poor and barely survives on subsistence farming. The hospital consists of a collection of small, single-story buildings in fair repair. The hospital reopened in 2017 under the leadership of a general surgeon, Dr. Isabel Yulundo, who's retired. Unfortunately, Dr. Abel's brother died the week before we got there, and he was not present during my time in Dundee. So I couldn't get a lot of my medical questions answered. When our group returned to Luanda on Saturday, Mike Solberg and I met with Dr. Abel for about 2 hours in the hotel lobby and talked about things. The language most people in Angola use is Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese. In Dundee, I had an interpreter, Moses Nunda Segunda. He was delightful and very helpful to me. He's a registered nurse in Wambo and also has a master's degree in veterinary science, and he works as a vet as well. He's married. His wife is a teacher. They have twin 7-year-olds, a boy and a girl. He took a week off from his work and family to help me at the Mission Hospital at Dundee. I could not have done what I did without him. He drove me to Dundee on Monday, drove me back on Friday, and stayed with me the entire week. We stayed in a trailer-like building, one of 7, each with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a living room. There was hot water available once they turned it on after my cold shower the first morning. There's no Wi-Fi or internet in Dundee. There is cell service if you have an Angolan phone, which I did not. We took all our meals at the home of a pastor couple. He is the head of the 7,000 acres that the church owns in Dundee, very large piece of property. She is the head of the seminary there, the theological seminary. He spoke no English. She had some English. They were delightful, and I would see them 3 times a day. Moses and I would drive 3 times a day down a very, very poor, dirt, rutted road. It would take 15 or 20 minutes to get around the potholes, and we had our breakfast, lunch, and dinner with this pastor couple. I saw patients in consultation in a room in the clinic, very Spartan, as the whole setup was. I worked half a day on Monday afternoon, half a day Friday morning, and all day Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I saw 112 patients, ranging in age from 6 months to 80 years. For many, I was the first physician they'd ever seen. These people are very, very poor. I saw a variety of ENT problems, ranging from allergy of the ear, which usually meant wax or cerumen, to profound deafness secondary to treatment for malaria with quinine. All the patients were very grateful, even though I couldn't do very much for them. The most amazing patient I saw was a 3-year-old boy who walked into the consultation room with his father, his grandfather, who was a pastor, 3 brothers, and 1 aunt. It was crowded. This 3-year-old boy had a tracheostomy. That's a hole in your neck in which a tube is placed to breathe, so you bypass an obstruction above that level. He had been diagnosed with asthma, which never got better. They tried all kinds of treatments. His asthma never got better. Finally, an ENT at the General Hospital in Wambo put him to sleep to do an exam under anesthesia and found that he had vocal warts, viral warts covering his vocal cords and larynx. This is called recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. So they diagnosed it at his first surgery, cleaned out as much as they could. A month later, he was back in severe trouble. They brought him back, cleaned out some more, and did a tracheostomy. So they put a hole in his neck and a tube in it so that he could breathe, bypassing the obstruction. At rest, he had stridor. Stridor is a medical term that means audible breathing at rest. As you sit here today, you probably can't hear your own breathing unless you have a cold. You could hear him across the room. So at rest, he was struggling to breathe with a tracheostomy. I have dealt with this disease a lot. I knew he was in serious trouble. I put my gloved finger over the hole to see if he could breathe around the obstruction. He could not move any air. He was totally obstructed above the tracheostomy tube. His name is Josias. He needed help. I'm in Angola. I don't know anybody. Pastor Moma and Mike went to work and found an ENT in Namibia, the adjoining country, who would see him, who had expertise in handling this problem. The family had been told in Angola that there were no physicians in the country who could treat him further. They would have to seek care elsewhere. So I corresponded with Dr. Van Tonder, who's an ENT in Namibia in private practice, and he saw him last week, and he's scheduled for surgery tomorrow at the private hospital, a Catholic hospital in Windhoek, Namibia. This surgery is going to cost $2,200 for the hospital fee, the surgeon fee, the anesthesia fee, transporting the family from Angola to Namibia, food, a place to stay. So you have in your pews a blue envelope, and Grant's going to talk about it more, but for a special offering to help him. He's not going to need just one surgery, he's going to need multiple surgeries. I've taken care of patients that have had over 100 procedures for this problem. It just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. Eventually you outgrow it, hopefully, or you die from it. There is a vaccine which we have gotten him called Gardasil, which helps with papilloma. As an aside, I would recommend if you have young children that they get treated with Gardasil for this problem and other cancers that can be prevented. But Josias is in real trouble. He's having surgery tomorrow. I pray that it goes well, and hopefully we can help him. Thank you.
This morning's reading is from the book of Habakkuk, verses 1.2 to 4 and 2.1 to 5. It begins with the writer speaking directly to God. He says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous. Therefore, judgment comes forth perverted. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint." Then the Lord answered me and said, "Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come, it will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. Moreover, wealth is treacherous. The arrogant do not endure. They open their throats wide as Sheol. Like death, they never have enough. They gather all nations for themselves and collect all peoples as their own." Here ends this morning's reading. Thanks be to God for these words of life.
I've led 4 high school work tours, 2 adult trips to Guatemala, and was an adult leader on many high school work tours prior to starting here. But this trip wasn't like that at all. See, I'm used to facilitating a certain kind of experience. I'm used to helping others wrestle with issues as they come up, not wrestling with them myself. And because we weren't there to accomplish something concrete, I sometimes found myself asking, what is it that I am actually doing here? And I think our experience that June alluded to with the shipment of corn to the south of the country can help illustrate some of the issues I wrestled with and the realizations I had. Right now, there's a massive drought in the southern part of Angola, which is causing starvation on an unimaginable scale. The average daily temperature in Angola has increased by 2 degrees over the past century, resulting in the worst drought in 38 years. And those of us on the trip saw just how many people scrape out an existence on subsistence farming. And when the crop comes up short, thanks in large part to our contributions to global climate change, folks have had to find other ways to eat. Reuters ran an article less than a month ago saying that many girls in Angola between the ages of 12 and 17 have to resort to survival sex work. And the going rate for transactional sex in US dollars is between 40 cents and $1. As Lori read for us, the prophet writes, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth perverted." So we, the delegation from Union Church, decided together with our Angolan brothers and sisters that something needed to be done about this while we were in town. Now, the story has many twists and turns, and relaying the whole saga would actually turn this into a 4-hour worship service, so I'm only going to highlight a few of the wrinkles. Very few things in Angola are consistent. Hot water, running water, electricity, availability of staple consumer goods, functionality of roads and vehicles. These are some of the things in the US that we expect consistency with, and that's just not the case in Angola. The currency exchange rate and the price of corn are constantly changing depending on the day and who you happen to be talking to, which makes trying to get a specific amount of kilos of corn very, very tricky. The plan was to buy thousands of kilos of corn and drive it down in a semi to the southern part of the country. And the government got wind of our plan. And so they said if we came up with enough kilos, they would pay for the truck. But as I said, the amount of money we actually had in Kwanzaa, as well as the actual price of corn, was constantly changing, making committing to a certain amount of corn very difficult. We experienced disappointment after disappointment in these negotiations, too many to list, and this kind of disappointment is really sort of a microcosm of Angola's history, which has certainly taken its toll. These are people who lived under Portuguese colonization for nearly 400 years, about 300 of which was involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Even in country, the Portuguese practiced forced labor, resulting in a war for independence. As Andy said, sort of starting in 1961 and all the way up until 1975 was the war for independence. But this was followed immediately by a civil war internally that lasted until 2002. And even since 2002, the government in Angola has not exactly empowered its people. Isabel Dos Santos, the daughter of the president of Angola from 1979 to 2017, has become the richest woman in Africa. I find it a little hard to believe that she created a net worth of $2 billion by the age of 46 based on her business acumen alone. When your country is the second largest producer of oil and the fourth largest producer of diamonds on the continent, and 2/3 of your population lives on less than $2 a day, it begs the question, where is the money going? Mike told us that it is often said of Angola that it is not Africa's poorest country, but it is its most tragic. Habakkuk writes, "Look at the proud, their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. Moreover, wealth is treacherous, the arrogant do not endure. They open their throats wide as hell, like death, they never have enough. They gather all nations for themselves and collect all peoples as their own." So when the culture has experienced this kind of trauma, I can see how difficult it must be to hold out hope. I was there for 10 days, and it even began to change how I thought. Let me give you an example. In my experience there, a good portion of the people, a good portion of the time, are late. This just kind of happens in Angola. Those on the trip are probably laughing. Things always take longer than you think they will. Modes and routes of transportation are unreliable. It's just sort of how life works. So I'm sitting at breakfast, and I'm about 5 or 6 days in, and I'm looking at my watch, and I've got about 5 or 10 minutes until our ride is supposed to arrive to pick us up for the day. And I'm debating whether I've got enough time to have another cup of coffee. Now, in the States, this thought wouldn't even cross my mind. I got to get my shoes on, I got to pack my bag. Who knows, my ride might be like 5 or 10 minutes early. But after being in Angola for a few days, I'm thinking, I probably have enough time for another one. There's no rush. You kind of see where this thought process leads? Now, I didn't pour myself another cup, and our ride was, in fact, on time that day. But I very easily could have contributed to that general lateness because I made a decision based on assuming others would be late. I consider myself a relatively patient person. I find the pace of life in the States, certainly up here in an urban, suburban, northern city, far too fast for me. And even I was losing my mind sitting around waiting for other people to make decisions on where we were going to go or how we were going to get there or what we were going to do next. The tone of my original question, what am I doing here, shifted from curious to an exasperated, what am I even doing here? And that, brothers and sisters, that opened up the possibility for growth. I found myself looking around and seeing how inefficient things are, how complex and deeply rooted the challenges in Angola are. My question was morphing into one that I've heard many of you expressed. Not only what am I doing here, but what are we, Union Church, doing here in Angola? In my efficiency-based, time management-obsessed mindset, I found myself thinking, all right, so I spent 1 million hours on a plane to come to a place where nothing gets done quickly, and my time could probably be spent in an underdeveloped country closer to home, or even just like on the south side, and I could get way more accomplished. Perhaps some of my teammates may be surprised to hear me say this, because I did not really express this on the trip. Why? Because if I, the staff mission liaison, am having doubts about the trip, I didn't want Lori or June or Jane to think, well, if Grant thinks this was a stupid idea, I can't believe I spent all this money and time to come here. But after talking with Mike and reflecting, I realized that this was the wrong question to ask. What am I, or even Union Church, doing here has me as the starting point. It assumes the trip, and really life as I know it, is about me. And as I thought about it even more, my past work tours influenced that pretty strongly. In Guatemala, we work for Habitat for Humanity, who has the short-term mission trip experience down to a science. Sure, the trip is to build homes, but Habitat isn't dumb. They know that if they don't facilitate a good experience for their customers, we'll take our vacation days and our do-gooder attitude elsewhere. On the high school trips, I'm facilitating a certain kind of experience for the youth. I don't even pretend those are about getting as much work done as efficiently as possible. It's about creating an experience for kids that will provoke deeper reflection on the injustices of the world in hopes of laying a foundation for a lifetime of service in love of the neighbor. Now, this focus on the trip participant is not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a different kind of trip, which explains my hesitancy to express my doubts to others in Angola. I didn't want to negatively affect their experience. But this trip was not Work Tour 101. This was a 300 level trip. And at the 300 level, the information is not spoon-fed to you. You have to do that work yourself. And ironically, the work wasn't working at all. I didn't know what it was, but Habakkuk does. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me, what he will answer concerning my complaint. I had to watch, I had to keep wait for what God was already doing. Mike has said time and again that God is working all around us all the time to build the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And with our free will, we choose whether we take part in that construction or not. I was looking at the construction of the kingdom as starting with me, with my role, not as something that God is already doing. And if I just got my head out of my sand, if I just got my head out of the sand, then I would see what's really going on here. Habakkuk writes, "Then the Lord answered me and said, 'Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come.'" See, God knows that there are plenty of runners out there like me. People want to run to fix things, run to make change for the better, run to check the next item off the list. So God tells Habakkuk that he's got to write this thing in big letters. Otherwise, we're going to run right by and miss it. And in our running, we want change, and we want it now, not at the appointed time. And if I'm impatient and the vision tarries or delays, God says to just wait for it. It will surely come. Now, the kingdom of heaven, the vision, has certainly not come to earth in its fullness yet. But my own little vision for the trip did come once I finally sat down on my watchpost. And that vision was that our Angolan brothers and sisters are just that, brothers and sisters. Being in relationship with people like Moma, Samakumbi, Chisola, Pasela, they brought me out of my own head and out of my own mindset. Mike and Janine and Mary Sue, they already deeply loved our friends in Angola. They had spent time building and developing relationships for Mike and Janine over the course of many years. And loving other people is hard. There's always a price with love. It requires vulnerability, the possibility of disappointment, the effort and empathy. Think about how you get upset with your kids or your parents or your partner or your friends, and that's likely without a substantial cultural difference. But that's what we are called to do, to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves, even if it takes a long time. It's how we live into our full humanity. It's what God made us for. To share in God's love, not only with God, but with all of creation. And that's the beauty of our relationships with the Angolans. It's a long-standing partnership based in love. To think about the trip at all in terms of a work tour was already totally the wrong frame. The trip was to build relationships. Or another way to say that is the trip was about really practicing what it means to love my neighbor. And sure, sometimes that does involve money. Corn isn't free, and if I love my neighbor, I want to do everything I can from keeping her from survival sex work in order to eat. Dr. Andy has special skills that allows him to love his neighbors in ways that none of us can through medicine and healing. But a partnership is mutual, and every single person on this trip got something different out of it. But I can assure you that it is more valuable than money. I got the opportunity to step outside my self-centered reality. My eyes were open to the work that God was already and is already doing there and the incredible people God is using to do it. I was reminded why I got into this business in the first place, because of the love that this work allows me to give and receive with all of God's beloved children. That genuine, profound kind of love that only comes after going through adversity. That comes only once I stop thinking about what I want or what I should be doing. The kind of love that comes through mutuality, not just beneficence. The kind of love we share together in partnership, walking and working side by side as brothers and sisters in Christ, building the kingdom of heaven, where everyone contributes and everyone individually is loved by God equally and infinitely.